Good morning, Miss Sutherland here by remote. Hate being out today, but you may have heard, or maybe not. I sort of had a little accident at work yesterday and fractured my leg, so I'm waiting to see the orthopedic doctor. I'll keep you updated on that. But this morning I wanted to be able to teach you one of my very favorite lessons. We've been talking about the elements of fiction for a very long time, so there's some things I want to review with you, and I want to share something really special, a couple things, just to help you to remember some of these definitions that I'm going to talk about really quickly. This is going to be uploaded to YouTube, and I will post a link to this video on my wiki, as will Miss Zunino, for you to review at home. YouTube is blocked for you at school, so I don't think you'll have access to it there, but I'm sure that you can access it from home if you don't catch it all and you need to go back over it, okay? So really quickly, and I have this on my computer screen because honestly I look pretty bad this morning. So I'm going to go through this really fast to save time, and then I want you to be on your best behavior and do everything that I asked you to do, because you're going to have a test on this on Monday. So you really need to be able to understand these definitions and know them by heart at that point, okay? So we're going to start by going over the 5 stages of plot. I'm going to go straight in order of this handout and just talk about everything briefly. We've already gone over the 5 stages of plot. Remember, you did the foldable that's in your interactive notebook, where you did define the 5 stages of plot and their exposition, which is the introduction to the setting and the characters and the conflict. It's the very beginning of the story. Then you have the rising action, which is where you find out what the conflicts are and you find out what the main one is. Remember, a story can have more than one, so there might be some mini conflicts. But there's usually one very big conflict that main character has to struggle with, and it's either an internal or an external struggle. And we've talked about those before too, and I'm going to hit on those next. So then you come to the climax. This is where the story hits its emotional high point, and the character faces whatever that main conflict is, and it's known as the turning point of the story. Then the action begins to fall or calm down. That's where the events begin to, you get some of the loose ends tied up, beginning to get tied up, and it goes to the resolution, which is, of course, the very end of the story, where you find out the outcome of the big conflict, and again, more loose ends are tied up. Now, authors are very smart. Sometimes they don't completely tie up all of the conflict. They kind of leave you hanging there with maybe a little piece of a conflict so that they can open up their next series with that. So just be aware that not every conflict might get tied up in the resolution, especially if it's a series of books. Alright, what are the different kinds of conflicts? We've talked about these. These are the things that the character has to struggle with. You have 4 different kinds of conflicts. Remember, we talked about the internal ones happen inside your mind. The external ones all happen on the outside of your body, or the character's body. There's only one type of internal struggle. That's man versus himself, or character versus himself. This is where the struggle is inside the character's head, like where the character's struggling whether to hang out with the popular kids or hang out with their old friends. So it's a internal, I need to do the right thing kind of thing, where you go to a friend's house maybe and your parents say, you know, you're not allowed, you're too young, we don't allow you to go to the mall, but your parents, the parents of the friend that you're with are like, come on guys, I'll take you to the mall, drop you off, I'm going to go do some shopping. Well, you know in your head that your parents are not going to allow you to do that, but you have this internal conversation with yourself. Well, should I call and ask? They're going to tell me no. You know, you have that internal conversation with yourself about what the right thing is for you to do in this situation. That's a perfect example of an internal conflict that a character might have with doing the right thing as well. Then you have the 3 external kinds of conflict. That's man versus society. This is where there is a struggle between the character and the rules of the governing society. The Hunger Games is a good example of that. Katniss struggles with the rules of her society, so she's a good example of that. Then you have man versus man. This is actually a struggle between two characters in a story. Harry Potter and Voldemort are a good example of that, where that you have actually two characters struggling with each other. And then, of course, there's man versus nature, where you have a character that's struggling against some sort of force of nature, whether it's floods or fires or just survival in the elements. And I always go back to one of my favorite novels as an example of this, and this would be Gary Paulson, where we read about him and the bear. He was struggling with the bear, and the bear almost killed him in that short story. So that's an example of character or man versus nature. So it was him against the bear. And of course, my favorite, Hatchet, has all kinds of examples of the main character, Brian, struggling with the elements of nature there too. Okay, I know that was really quick, but we have already learned all this stuff, so that was just a quick review. Now we're going to move on to character. The characters are the entities involved in the action or the story. Now, these characters do not have to be human. It might be animals, it might be claymation characters, it might be human beings, it might be aliens. So just remember that characters in a story can be real people, they can be imaginary creatures, they can be animals, like in the case of Charlotte's Web. So don't get hooked into characters as just being people, because that's not true. Think of all the characters you know from, say, Beauty and the Beast. Okay? So, I want to talk about one of my very favorite things for character types. I'm going to give you the names of some characters to list right here beside these different characters types. And I'm going to use one of my all-time favorite things ever to talk about this. I'm going to switch screens and show you a little clip of exactly what I'm talking about. This is an example of the test that you will be having. Okay? But for the characterizations, guys, let's talk about Shrek!
Princess, where are you? It's very spooky in here. I like playing the games. Well, at least we know where the princess is. But where's the...
DreamWorks Pictures invites you to a land of fairy tales.
Hey! Oh, no. Dead girl, off the table!
Well, we're supposed to put it. The bed's taken.
What?
Where an unlikely hero
You definitely need some Tic Tacs or something, because your breath stinks.
rescues a fair princess
You didn't slay the dragon?
It's on my to-do list.
from a nasty villain with the help of his trusty companion.
This is gonna be fun. We can stay up late, swap the manly stories, and in the morning, I'm making waffles.
This summer, one name spells action.
You're not exactly what I expected.
One name spells adventure.
How about him? Before this is over, I'm gonna need a whole lot of serious therapy.
One name
Don't look down. I'm looking down.
spells romance.
It's no way to behave in front of a princess. She's as nasty as you are. Come on!
There's an arrow in your butt.
And that name is
Shrek.
Shrek. Thank you very much. I'm here till Thursday.
Mike Myers, Eddie Murphy, Cameron Diaz, John Lithgow.
You love this woman, don't you? Yes. You want to hold her? Yes. Please? Yes. Then you got to a little
Shrek.
Wow. Let's do that again. No, don't.
Okay, so on that note, we will move back to what I was showing you prior. Okay, oh, wait a minute, let me stop it. Alright, so if you haven't seen the movie Shrek, I'm talking about Shrek number 1, not any characters beyond Shrek number 1. Okay, so let's look at the 7 types of characters, and let's identify the characters in the Shrek 1 that connect with these. Okay, so you have the protagonist. That's the main character that's faced with a conflict. Well, that one's easy. Of course, we know that's Shrek. So out beside protagonist here, go ahead and write the character Shrek. And I'm sure one of the teachers there can write up how to spell these words, okay, if you don't know how. So, Shrek is our protagonist. He is facing a conflict. Now, what is the conflict he's facing? A lot of people have forgotten because this is the first movie. So, the conflict that he's facing is he has all these fairy tale creatures in his swamp because they've been sent out of the city by the antagonist to live in the swamp with him. He's thrown them out of his city or his village. And so the antagonist, or the person or thing that's causing the conflict, is Lord Farquaad. Okay? He is the antagonist in this particular movie. Alright, so main character. This is one of those things where there's two words. You might see either one of these used on the EOG. So the main character might also be called the round character. This is the character that's well developed and that plays a significant role in the story. Well, our main character, there's several, but of course the main character for which the movie's named is Shrek. So we will identify Shrek as the main character here. And when you think of round, think of how Shrek looks. He's kind of round in the middle. So that'll help you to have a visual indicator of which character is round or main. And then for your minor or flat character, these are characters that you learn a lot less about, and the role in the story is supportive of the other characters, but ultimately if you took these minor or flat characters out, the story would still go on as it is. It just might not be as interesting. The best example to help you to remember, since we said the main character is Shrek and he's very round in the middle, we're going to say the minor character, one of the minor characters that I really enjoy, who is also very flat, would be the gingerbread man. So we're going to put the gingerbread man as an example of a flat character. Now, the last three tend to be more difficult for people to understand. We have the dynamic character, which is a person that changes in personality or attitude. The static character, who is the character that doesn't change at all. And then you have the foil character. The foil character is a person that possesses characteristics that are usually in very sharp contrast to another character. Okay? So when I say the word dynamic, you usually think of somebody that's very high energy. Well, most people want to say that Donkey is dynamic. Donkey is not dynamic. The most dynamic character in the movie is Shrek himself. If you think about Shrek in the beginning, he's this loner that lives in the swamp all by himself. He doesn't have friends. He just wants to be by himself and take his mud baths and eat his grub worms. But by the end of the movie, he has all these friends now, and he's actually getting married. So he is our most dynamic character because he's the one that changes the most. Okay, so we're going to identify Shrek as our dynamic character. Now, the static character, the character that doesn't change, okay, that one would be, the person in the movie who doesn't change at all would be Lord Farquaad. Because basically, Lord Farquaad is a character who is a jerk in the beginning, and he's a jerk at the end when the dragon eats him. So he's consistently a jerk all the way through the movie. So he is our most static character. Now the foil character, let me go back and add, there is another very static character as well, even though we identified Lord Farquaad as the one that we're going to use for the static. I do want to add the comment that in addition to Lord Farquaad, you could also say that Donkey is a very static character. The reason Donkey is a static character is because, and don't let this scare you, Donkey, in the very beginning when you meet him, he's sort of like, whoa, all over the place. He's very hyper and loud and obnoxious. Well, guess what? At the end of the movie, Donkey is still, whoa, good, very loud and obnoxious, and he hasn't changed. So he is another example of a static character. We also have another dynamic character besides Shrek. You'll have to really think hard about this. The other character that changes a lot in personality or attitude is the dragon. Remember, they meet the dragon. She's trying to kill Shrek and Donkey. She's very grumpy. And at the end, she's all Twitter-pated and in love. And she wants to marry Donkey. And so she also has a very big personality and attitude adjustment by the end of the scene. But again, we'll leave Shrek as the most dynamic, and Lord Farquaad as the most static. Now the foil, this is a character that is in sharp contrast to another character. Authors use these characters to make the personalities of each of these characters stand out. Well, I've already said Shrek was very grumpy and grouchy in the beginning. Well, who is the exact total opposite of that? That would be Donkey. Okay? If you think about Shrek, the authors paired him with Donkey because they are such opposites in behaviors and what they look for in life. Now, towards the end of the movie, they become a little more similar in that they're both have friends and all that stuff. But Donkey is definitely a foil character for Shrek himself. So we're going to put Donkey as our foil character. Now, what is characterization? These are techniques the writer uses to develop the character themselves. What are some of the things the authors use? They might give us a physical description. They might use the speech or actions of a character to let us know more about the character. The narrator might just tell us specific things about the character using direct comments. And the author might tell us about other characters based on what the other characters say about him or her in the text of the story as well. Okay? So that's the character types and characterization, which is techniques, again, that the writer uses to develop the different character types. Alright, so we're going to move now to setting and time. We've gone over that before. The setting is the time and the place where the action occurs. Don't forget the time. Sometimes people forget that that's part of the action. Now, there are three components under setting a time. The time and place. The time is the when of the story. Is it day or night or what season or what month? Or, it can be as specific as you want, down to the second. Or it can be as broad as long ago in a land far, far away. So the time is the when of the story, and the place is the where of the story. Then we've also talked about mood and tone, guys. Mood, the feeling the reader gets when they're reading. Mood starts with the letter M, which stands for me, the reader. Make yourself a little note. Mood is for me, the reader. Tone, which starts with a T, is for them, the author, and his or her attitude toward what they're writing or what they're feeling as they're writing. So mood is about how I feel when I read it. Tone is about them, the authors, and how they feel when they write it. One of the things that they use is sensory details. These are words that appeal to the senses, like sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. This helps us to understand the setting, and a lot of times makes it more appealing for us to read because it helps us to feel a connection with what we're reading. Like if they talk about the crackling of a fire, most of us have heard a fire crackle before, so that gives us a good visual image of that fire, and we can almost hear the sizzle of the wood and the pop of the wood as the flames are dancing around. So they use sensory details to help us understand the text as well. There are some types of figurative language. We're going to hit on just three right now. The simile, the metaphor, and personification. The similes it's similar. Think of the word similar. So this is when you compare things using the words like or as. Her hair was as golden as corn silk. That's an example of a simile. I used the word as a corn silk. A metaphor, you can say the same thing in the form of a metaphor and just not use the word like or as. So this is also comparing two things, but it does not use the word like or as. So I could also say, her hair is golden corn silks, but I'm still giving you the same message no matter whether I do it as a simile or a metaphor. I'm doing that comparison of her hair to the corn silk, which is the silky stuff in a corn. Of course, I'm from the country, so I would go there. So that's how you know the difference in simile. And I think of the simile as the word similar, meaning comparing things and using like as, and a metaphor, not using those two words, but still comparing two things. I'll give you one more example. A simile, you could say, her eyes are as green as emeralds. That would be a simile because I used as again. Or I could simply say, her eyes are green emeralds. Again, saying the same thing as a simile said, just without using that word as, so that makes it a metaphor. Okay? Personification, this is when you give any object, whether it's human or non-human, the traits of a human, or as the first part of the word indicates, you treat them like they're a person, like they have the actions of a person. For example, you could say, the flames dance in the fire. Well, we know that fire is not a human, but we're giving it the qualities of a human by saying it dances like human beings can. Okay? So that's an example of personification. I think of Beauty and the Beast. There's a lot of personification there because we have the teacup and the candlestick and the clock and all the talking furniture. Those are all examples of personification in giving non-human objects the traits of human beings and the ability to do the things we do. All right, so point of view. Let's move to point of view. There are 4 main types of point of view that I need you to understand. Okay? Third person, omniscient, and third person, limited. These are similar, but they're different. Third person tells us that there's a narrator outside of the action that knows thoughts and feelings and motives of characters. Okay? The difference in omniscient and limited third person, when you're telling something in third person, you use words like he, she, and they. Okay? So, with omniscient, I think of the word omniscient, those of you that have gone to church or have a religious background of some sort, you may recognize that because frequently religions say that their God, whomever or whatever that is, are omniscient, meaning they see everything, they hear everything. You can't do anything and hide your feelings from them. They know everything. Okay? So the third person omniscient narrator is one that knows all the thoughts, motives, and feelings of all the characters in the story. While the third person limited is a narrator that also stands outside the action, just like the omniscient one, but that particular narrator focuses on only the thoughts and feelings of one character. So they can tell you what one character's thinking, but not the other characters in the story. So omniscient is all-knowing, third person omniscient. They know all the thoughts and feelings of all the characters. Third person limited means that that narrator can only tell you the thoughts and feelings of one character. Then you have a first person point of view. And this is where the main character tells his or her own story, and they tell it using the word I. So, I am number 1, so I am the first person. Always remember that, and that'll help you to remember the difference in first person and third person. Okay? So, first person, I am number 1, and it's told from the point of view of the main character, and they would refer to himself or herself as I. Then you have the objective narrator, and this is a narrator that doesn't know the thoughts or feelings of anyone, and they only report the action of the story to you. Objective is what we should see on a news report or a sports broadcaster. They are supposed to be objective narrators, only telling us the play-by-play action of what's going on the field. So that's a way to remember that one. So point of view is the perspective from which the story is told. Okay? Theme. That's a pretty easy one. The universal message the author wants the reader to understand. Okay? For example, a person can never escape his or her own crimes. We try to narrow the theme down to a single word if we can. A lot of themes might be the theme of friendship. They might be like in The Island of the Blue Dolphins. If I had to put that theme in one word, I would say survival. Let's see. I might also say that she was very stubborn and never gave up. So persistence would be another example of a theme I could say for Island of the Blue Dolphins. But I would say the main one, and most stories do have more than one theme, you have to think in terms of which is the theme that I see the most in a story. Okay? So for Island of the Blue Dolphin, I would probably say survival. Symbol. We've used symbols all the way through. You're going to do that again when you do the flip book for the Elements of Fiction. That'll be assigned to you in a little bit. A symbol can be a person, a place, or an object. It has a concrete meaning by itself, but it also stands for something beyond itself. For example, if somebody draws a heart, you automatically think of love. So a heart is a symbol for love. It represents that idea of feelings and caring. Okay, one last thing that I need to share with you, and I'm going to have to stick my hand out up here because I don't have any other way to present this information to you. I'm actually going to put my computer to sleep for a minute so that the light is not shining behind it, so that you can actually see my handout because you have one just like it. Okay, the last thing I need to talk about is author's purpose. Okay? You've learned author's purpose is pie. The author's purpose for writing is to persuade, to inform, and to entertain. Now you have to, in 6th grade, learn how to say it like me, like an old country girl. Now author's purpose becomes pie. So you have to draw that E out. We're going to add 2 E's. We now are thinking of author's purpose in terms of to persuade, to inform, to entertain. We're adding to explain or to express opinions or thoughts. Okay? That's all defined up here. An author must also know what kind of audience he or she is writing to. You need to think of that before you start writing so that you use the proper vocabulary to target that audience so that they can understand what you're trying to say. And you might identify the author as children, adults, or just everybody. Okay? So look over this. The one other thing that I'll touch on when you're thinking about authors is you have to be aware of an author's bias. This is how an author presents evidence, and sometimes they sort of have a big opinion of themselves, and so they might sort of leave out information that could make you think differently from them. So an author's bias may color how the author presents the evidence, and it can lead to an author leaving out facts in favor of his or her own opinion. Have a lovely day. I'll see you soon. Miss ya. Bye.